Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another video. Today, I'm going to be doing an election prediction if Tim Walz, the governor of the state of Minnesota, is picked by Kamala Harris to be vice president. For a long time, it seems like many people have thought that it's actually going to be Josh Shapiro. However, over the last few hours, it does seem as if it's shifted over to the Walz camp. Black SUVs were reported outside of his state house, I believe, in Minnesota, looking like it's going to be Walz. There were reports as well that former Speaker Nancy Pelosi and former President Barack Obama were encouraging Harris to pick Walz. I think many Democrats were concerned that if Harris picked Shapiro, it would off-put a lot of Arabs and Muslims that live in states like Michigan and Minnesota who wouldn't be too favorable voting for a ticket with a Jewish person on it, to be completely blatant. Even in somebody like Josh Shapiro, who has a history of being relatively pro-Israel. Um, of course, it's not guaranteed to be Walz. It could be Shapiro, and she could announce that tomorrow. But right now, it looks like it will be him. In my personal opinion, I think that Shapiro would have been a better pick, and would be a better pick. It hasn't been made yet, but as I said, it looks like she'll be picking Tim Walz of Minnesota. This is the prediction on the eve of the actual announcement. Many people believe that announcement will be tomorrow, um, and they'll be having a rally tomorrow as well. With that being said, let's see how this VP announcement affects Harris's election chances. So let's begin with the safe Harris states. Sorry, I did not mean to pick Nevada. California, Hawaii, of course, the usual safe Democrat states. These pretty much would have been safe for Biden. I mean, in some of these, the margins narrowed up a little bit. Relatively, though, he was guaranteed to win these 181, and so will Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. I'm trying to pronounce that last name. It sounds like there's a T in it all the time, but it's only Walz. Um, anyway, Trump Vance, you're going to get the usual 125. Just going to be pretty straightforward with the safe states. Even a state like Minnesota, with Walz on the ticket, I mean, he performed worse than Biden, actually. Um, Even with that, I still think it would be in a likely category. However, it is possible to shift. We just don't know yet. Now, that being said, Minnesota is a likely Walz state, as well as Colorado is a likely Walz state, um, as well as the state of Virginia. I think he'll play well with with suburban women. He's kind of like a Tim Kaine, um, who certainly helped Hillary out in Virginia. Now, in other areas of the country, of course, they never won that election, and I think she probably could have picked a better VP. But he did help her with suburban women as opposed to Trump, who performed very badly with them in 2016 and then again in 2020 with Biden as the top of the ticket. He did very well with them. Walz could help Harris regain a lot of those women who may have been disassociated with the Democrats following Biden's withdrawal from the nomination. With that being said, uh, forgot to mention Maine at large would be a likely state for them. Now let's get into our likely Trump Vance states. It's going to be a decent amount. It's going to be Iowa and Ohio. Vance, of course, performs better in the Midwest. He definitely performed worse than DeWine in 2022. However, he has that appeal. He does have the Rust Belt appeal to kind of balance out with Walz. So these states definitely will be more competitive with Walz and Vance on the ticket. Trump already has his own Rust Belt appeal. He's performed better than any Republican at the top of the ticket in the Rust Belt for a very, very long time. I mean, McCain and Romney certainly did not win Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania at all, or were never even close in those states, really, looking at them. State of Texas, another likely Walz state, as well as state of Florida. Additionally, Maine 2nd Congressional District. Texas relatively has been likely. It's what we suspect it to be. And 2024, maybe down the line, could narrow up more. But right now, still pretty solidly in the Republicans category. Florida, however, shifted tremendously in favor of Republicans over the last few election cycles, which is very beneficial for Republicans because they don't have to spend much money on Florida, which is previously what they have had to do. Um, and they can focus their efforts on the key swing states that are left. After I go through the lean Harris states, you'll probably have those remaining swing states that have yet to be called. Really, the seven, as you know: Nevada, Arizona, the Rust Belt, North Carolina, and Georgia. Those key states, and they can focus more of their money. Florida has definitely almost gone out of reach for the Democrats. There's not many Democrats that have won statewide races in Florida in a long time. You had Nikki Fried, who tried against tried to win the nomination for the Democrats in 2022 against for DeSantis, but it didn't work out for her. She was the Florida Agricultural Commissioner, but nonetheless, she That was pretty much the only statewide election Democrats won in Florida in some time, considering the fact that it's a bellwether state. No longer. Lean Harris Wall states, New Mexico still be lean Harris Wall. We have seen significant shift in the Hispanic community going against Kamala Harris. She's underperforming with Hispanics more than any other Democrat candidate in recent modern history. And that could certainly hurt her in these Sunbelt states, which I do think you'll expect to be seeing happening, which is why I'm putting New Mexico in that lean column. She'll probably end up winning it by 4 or 5 points. As well as the state of New Hampshire. As I said, Walz will help with the suburban areas. And for that reason, Nebraska's second congressional district. I'm really going to leave these Rust Belt states to the tilt margins. So that's 226. That's pretty much their floor, but the tilt states will be, allocated as they are. For Donald Trump, state of North Carolina, lean Trump state. He's won that consistently. Mitt Romney won it in 2012. I find it pretty difficult for the Democrats to win it this time around. I think, they said that they're going to go for it, but I think it'd be a smart campaign strategy for Harrison Walz, if he's the nominee, VP nominee, to focus it more on the Rust Belt and Georgia, frankly, as opposed to North Carolina. I just don't really think they have much of a shot there this time around. It's a very different environment than it was in 2020, and Trump is more popular historically, really, than he's ever been before, and he's in a better position to win. So you really have to focus on holding that blue wall. That's the most important thing. I think toward the end of the campaign, they'll kind of ditch North Carolina, as it seems as if it's going to be a very tight election, and then focus on holding the blue wall. Therefore, North Carolina will be a lean Republican state. That goes for the state of Nevada. As I said, I think Trump's going to do pretty well in the Sun Belt with these Republicans and the Hispanic states. Hispanics are a large portion of the population in all of these states, New Mexico included, Texas, of course. For that reason, Nevada and Arizona will be going to Donald Trump by lean margins. That gets him to 252 electoral votes. So we have 4 states yet to call: Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. 3 of those are the blue wall, the Rust Belt. They fell for Hillary Clinton in 2016. Biden rebuilt it. He expanded with Arizona and Georgia. However, as I said, very different election cycle. This is not 2016, and it is in 2020. In 2016, Trump came in as an outside. It's very hard to predict these because, you think it's the same thing, but it really isn't. Trump came in as an outsider in 2016, a businessman. He's really had a hell of a life, to be honest with you. Started off as a real estate developer, then went into entertainment, and then finally went into politics. 3 different aspects, I would say, of his life. Of course, many other things in between. But in 2016, he was the outsider candidate. He was the guy who was just attacking everybody and calling all of the politicians, lifelong politicians, just a bunch of idiots who are fake. And, you can go and rewatch the Republican primary debates from 2015 and 2016 and the presidential debates between him and Hillary in 2016 and understand that. And that was the environment then. And Hillary was seen as this lifelong politician, former first lady, former secretary of state, the Clinton dynasty, if you may call it that. And Trump went up against that. In 2020, Trump came into the election as an incumbent president. He had, at that point, established a precedent of what people would expect him to govern the country like. Of course, there was a pandemic that was going on. There was race riots throughout the summer of 2020. A lot of tension going on then. Very different election cycle, going up against former Vice President Joe Biden at the time, who was, many would argue, more formidable than Hillary Clinton. However, Biden's now dropped out because of the fact that, basically, quote unquote, to defend democracy, basically meaning he wouldn't win the election if he stayed in the race. That's basically the bottom line. That's why he dropped out. This time around, Trump is going up against the vice president. Joe Biden's picked for vice president and his endorsement for the nomination. This is an individual who actually never won the nomination of the Democrat Party. She was kind of installed at the last minute because Biden couldn't beat Trump, and clearly he has, in my opinion, some form of cognitive decline. We saw that highlighted at the debate in particular. Harris is now put forward as the nominee, second female presidential nominee. Of course, there's been controversy over her ethnicity: half Indian, half African American, half black. I guess Jamaican, actually, not African American. But regardless, it's very different from somebody like Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton. She's not really kind of that dynasty type of politician. She has had a historical career in politics going back 25 years, but not really at the forefront of it. She really came to prominence in 2017 after she won her Senate race in California and she was sworn in. And she played a very big role in the Senate during the times, especially like the justice confirmation hearings of Brett Kavanaugh, things like the Obamacare attempt to repeal, all sorts of things that Trump, in terms of legislation, was trying to pass back then, picked to be Joe Biden's VP, and now installed as the nominee of the Democrat Party. This time, in terms of Trump, he is a former president. He has now a real legacy of people that kind of can look back at his term and compare it to President Biden's. It would have been a rematch, but now it's very different. Um, and for the most part, people actually kind of view President Trump's presidency in a very good way. They actually think that it was kind of a good presidency compared to, President Biden. And I guess Harris, kind of is a part of that administration, but in a different way. So he comes in as a former president this time, somebody who has kind of been through a lot to get to this point. He was impeached multiple times, of course, at the end of his administration. I would say many people, many Republicans, Democrats, independents, political pundits, thought he was done after January 6th, after the impeachment. He almost, not almost, 10 senators away from being prevented from being president again. He came back, one of the biggest political comebacks, I think, in American history, to be honest with you now, Republican nominee for president. He's been convicted of felonies. Of course, Republicans argue that those are politically motivated and, illegitimate for that reason. There's been efforts to kick him off of the ballot in states like Maine and in Colorado that have failed because the Supreme Court overturned those rulings. Of course, he was almost assassinated. He's been through the gauntlet. He's been through so much. And here he is as the nominee for his party. It's Republicans kind of view him as some sort of, I don't want to call him like a prophet. And this is in the reference in how Republicans view him as some sort of like generational figure who this is it. He's supposed to be here. He's kind of gotten that framing following his presidency over the last 4 years, over the Biden presidency and his development in politics. So I kind of just spent a few minutes discussing all of that, but I think it's important to zoom out a little bit and really look at this election as a completely different election from 2016 and 2020. So, which makes it, you think, well, we've seen Trump go up nationally twice already, and it seems like, okay, we kind of know how well he performs. It's just a different environment each of these times compared to 2016 and 2020. Different things have happened, and that's obvious, but it's important to frame it as such a manner. With all of that being said, let's finally characterize these final 4 states. Probably going to be the closest states this time around. Georgia, maybe not. Harris definitely making a play for it there. To begin, because Josh Shapiro is not the nominee of the Democrat Party, she will tilt the state of Michigan in her favor, getting her to 241. Walz on the ticket will help her in the Rust Belt appeal. However, let's go to a Trump state now. State of Pennsylvania going to give to Donald Trump by a tilt margin because Shapiro isn't on the ticket. I think that it flips. I think that Trump actually holds on to Pennsylvania, meaning he's elected president. He's doing the best in the polls there historically. He's been pretty well. He's done well in Pennsylvania, even against Joe Biden. Only lost it by less than a point and a half, 1.2%, against somebody like Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket who just doesn't have that Rust Belt appeal compared to Trump. I think he'll win Pennsylvania at this point. I think he's got it. With regard to Kamala Harris, I think she'll tilt Georgia. Hold on to Georgia. She's grown in popularity, of course, with the black support and the black turnout. We'll see exactly what happens. I think there's a lot of inflated enthusiasm behind her campaign at the moment because Democrats now actually have a candidate they can kind of get behind, as opposed to Biden, who really didn't have any enthusiasm going for him. Had no charisma at this point. He's, no longer who he was 4 years ago, let alone 15 years ago. So I think the final state, Wisconsin, goes in favor of Trump, getting him to 281. So a very close election, a nail-biter election. Trump ends up winning it, going on to become president again, 281 to 257 with Tim Walz on the ticket. With Shapiro on the ticket, it definitely goes differently. However, that wouldn't necessarily be favorable for Kamala Harris, I think, and I'll leave it to speculation in terms of if I make another video, if she picks Shapiro, but a state like Pennsylvania could go differently. But if because of his Jewish ethnicity and his pro-Israel support. A state like Michigan could go differently because Arabs wouldn't turn out in his favor. States like Minnesota could narrow up because of that. It wouldn't be likely in this scenario. So, you take it as you can. With that being said, thank you for watching the video. Please make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Comment below your thoughts on this election prediction scenario. If Walz is the VP nominee, what states would you keep the same? What would you change? And yeah, subscribe to the YouTube channel and have a great day.